What is happening, Enhance Your Edge Nation? Coach Brad Wilson here, and before we dive in to Poker Tales Episode 2, I would like to take a second to let you know about Chasing Poker Greatness, the podcast where I, as the host, interview amazing legends of the game, up-and-coming stars, and great ambassadors of the game of poker to share their stories, their insights, their wisdom, how they improve their game on a daily basis, lessons they have learned, failures that could have been avoided. I know that it's something that you will enjoy consuming, and the amazing thing about podcasts is it's a secondary activity. You can do it on your commute. You can do it while you're working out. It doesn't have to be your primary activity, and it also helps improve your poker game. So check out Chasing Poker Greatness wherever it is that you consume podcasts. And now, let's dive into what you're going to learn in Poker Tales episode number 2. As you may have heard 1 or 1,000 times by now due to a very successful marketing campaign, poker is a game of information collection. And there's no better way to collect information in a live poker setting than observing the mannerisms of the folks you're battling against. And I want to make a point here about the footage that's used in this training video. The stakes being played for are massive and include some of the elite crushers in the world. If you've ever wondered just how prevalent and valuable poker tells really are, this video is going to show you that even in the bleediest of the nosebleeds, there's still a ton of information you can gain if you're paying close attention. So in this episode of Poker Tells, you're going to learn the dangers of showing your cards as related to your body language and mannerisms, an extremely common poker tell that you use to greatly improve your earn rate, and then also why making tiny expressions matter even after you've already mentally folded. And as we hop into the footage, try to bear in mind that even though some of these tells are very slight, very tiny, poker players have intuition. Human beings have intuition, which is a collection of our subconscious observations. And in my experience, this is what manifests as a quote-unquote gut feeling, right? If you have a gut feeling, you think somebody's bluffing, what's most likely happening is your subconscious has picked up on information that you've previously observed. So trust your gut, pay close attention, build up that poker instinct, that poker intuition, and then maximize it for everything that it's worth. All right, now let's jump into the footage. So as I'm giving analysis and breaking down these hands, they're played in South Korean won, which is about 1,200 to 1 US dollars. The stakes are 1 million, 2 million, 2 million South Korean won. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to be breaking them down using South Korean won. You can see in USD the stakes in the graphic on the footage itself. So in hand number 1, everybody folds to Bobby Baldwin on the button, who opens to 7 million with pocket queens. JRB folds, and Mr. Wu opts to defend the ace of diamonds, 5 of hearts out of the straddle. He's 2 to 1. I don't mind his defend with ace 5 off here. Preferably, I think it plays better as a 3-bet versus a button raiser, depending on who the button raiser is, how aggressive they are, what their steal percentage seems to be, and then how often they fold to 3-bets. So while I don't mind the defend, I think a 3-bet is better under different situations. But like always, you have to understand the conditions of the game that you're playing in before going one way or the other. So we see a flop with 17 million in the pot. The flop is 10 of diamonds, 8 of clubs, deuce of diamonds. Mr. Wu checks as anticipated, and Bobby Baldwin kind of oddly decides to check back. I'm not exactly sure what information he had that led him to check back here. I would much rather prefer exploitively to bet for value. We can get value from any 10, any 8, any pocket pair, any sort of straight draw, all the flush draws. There's just a lot of hands that we're beating. And if Mr. Wu is, say, 3-betting pocket tens versus a button raise with a high percentage of the time, or maybe he's 3-betting pocket eights with a high percentage of the time as well. He's not going to have a ton of hands that beat us here, so I would love to maximize value, get calls out of all the weaker hands versus checking back. As played though, can't redo it, right? What's done is done. So the flop goes check, check, and now we head to the turn. So the turn pops off the King of Diamonds, which is not an amazing card for Bobby Baldwin. Mr. Wu, if you're watching, he delays, and then he opts to check. I think he is considering his options. A bet is obviously going to be fine with the nut flush draw. Check is likely going to be fine as well, depending on who you're playing against, but he's very tempted to bet here. That's what the delay and then check means. And then we head over to Bobby Baldwin, who opts to fire about a 1/3 size pot bet with his queens. I do like betting for value here. I think we need to be betting for value. We can get called by any pairs plus diamond draws. However, the 1/3 sizing, we're giving villain 4-1 direct odds to call on the turn. So villain's getting a very good price and will be very tempted to peel with his high equity hands like sixes with the 6 of diamonds, for instance. And I think that he's going to call with the sixes with the 6 of diamonds anyway. So a lot of the hands that you're targeting get called by the 1/3 bet and the half pot size bet. So you may as well size up, maximize value. With that said, now Mr. Wu flats. And when Mr. Wu flats here, another point that I want to make, he does something kind of odd. He looks like he's going to call with his small chips, and then he grabs a big chip and throws the big chip in the pot as well so that the dealer can give him change. I'm not exactly sure what that's about, but it's something to pay attention to moving forward. And if you're playing against somebody like a Mr. Wu and they do something like that where there's variance in their actions, maybe they call with their big chips with their weaker hands on the turn or their draws, and maybe they call with the smaller chips when they have a made hand. Just something to pay attention to. You may be able to put it in your back pocket and use it in the games that you're playing in. The river pairs the 10 of spades, and Mr. Wu checks, and now the action's on Bobby Baldwin. Mr. Baldwin opts to use a 1/3 value bet sizing here, which I very much like. He can get called by a lot of pairs that are worse than his queens. He is going to get called by some King X sometimes, assuming that Mr. Wu plays a check call line with his King X on the turn and doesn't bet out for value himself. If he bets out for value himself with his sets, his top pair, the king, the 10, the flushes, all of those hands, then we can really conclude that Mr. Wu's range isn't very strong here on the river, and this is villain dependent, right? So very much understand your villain's frequencies, what they tend to do with their value on the turn, or the hands that they're trying to bet out to protect. With all that being said, Mr. Baldwin, I think, makes a great value bet. His queens are most likely good, like I said before. And then he gets some unexpected news. Mr. Wu goes ahead and raises to 30 million. And here's where we find poker tell number 1. Mr. Wu kind of gives it this number, like, which to me means, like, yeah, no big deal. It's like asking your friend, hey, could you hand me a bottle of water? And they're like, yeah, sure, no big deal. Here's your bottle of water. It's a tell. The mannerisms basically mean, yeah, no sweat, no big deal. I'm calm, I'm in control. And poker tells specifically weak, strong, strong, weak. This to me would mean Mr. Wu is trying to act confident, like he's got it under control, when the reality is he's not super confident. He's bluffing. Unfortunately, Bobby Baldwin didn't pick up on the tell this time and folded the river, but it's just something to keep an eye out for whenever somebody makes a mannerism like this, like, okay. Like, think about the context that humans use that mannerism in their day-to-day life, and if the context is, yeah, sure, easy, no problem, that means that whoever's giving off the tell is acting strong, when in actuality, they're actually quite weak. All right, so hand number 2 begins with Romain opening to 6 million under the gun. Andrew Roble opts to 3-bet him to 20 million with King Queen off. JRB flats the 20 million cold with pocket fives. And then we get to Mr. Wu once again, who very quickly cuts out 100 million South Korean won raise. And if you're paying attention here, number one, the first thing to notice is that Mr. Wu doesn't look at his cards before making this raise, which means that as they're being dealt to him, he's looking at his cards kind of the first thing, right? And this is something to pay attention to when you're looking for physical tells with people looking at their cards in a live setting. Before you take your action, find where people are looking at their cards, because it's information you can't get back. You can't get that reaction back once it's gone. So you need to know the sequence or when they're doing it. I would assume Mr. Wu's looking at them early on, like right as they're dealt to him. Number two, when he puts his chips in the pot, he does a little tapping thing. He taps the table and then he puts out the 100 million. I think that's something to pay close attention to moving forward. These little subconscious things that people do, they can mean a variety of things, but that tap and then the throw in is very likely a subconscious thing that's going to be information one way or the other. He does it with his strong hands, he does it with his weaker hands, whatever the case may be, it's valuable and you can use it in the future. So I lied. We're not going to go to clip 3 just yet. First, I just want to show a short clip of Aaron Zhang in a pot that he played. I'm not going to break down the whole hand. What's most important is the look on his face. JRB opts to bet after Bobby Baldwin raised and then checked. Aaron Zhang calls with middle pair, and then Bobby Baldwin decides to check raise 4x. JRB instantly folds because he has nothing, and then Aaron Zhang, you can see he makes this number. It's annoyance, it's frustration. He's already mentally folded, right? And in the next hand number 3 that we're going to get into now, I want you to understand why, even if you've mentally folded, why showing that little micro expression of disgust can really come back and bite you if you're not careful. All right, hand number 3 starts out with Bobby Baldwin limping under the gun with pocket 4s. I don't mind the limp. Again, this is dependent on the conditions of the game. The players seem to have some depth. Maybe he can add in some limp raises to balance his range. I'm not sure of his limping strategy, but I'm not just going to outright say that I don't like it. I think it's probably going to be okay. Everybody folds to Aaron Zhang in the small blind, who has the Jack-9 of clubs, and he makes kind of a curious raise to 5 million, which is just super, super tiny. Makes me feel like maybe he didn't see that Bobby Baldwin limped, because the last thing you'd want to do with a hand like Jack-9 of clubs is raise to 5 million and give Bobby Baldwin the option to limp raise him big, and then you don't get to see a flop with the Jack-9 of clubs. So in my mind, it's either isolate big to 8 or 9 million or just limp, so that, you know, if Tom Dwan opts to squeeze from the big blind, you can still profitably call. You can see what Bobby Baldwin does as well before you call. So if Bobby Baldwin opts to limp raise, then you just fold your Jack-9 and you've really invested the minimum, right? So I would rather go big or just limp along, but as played, Aaron Zhang opts to raise to 5 million. Tom Dwan defends from the big blind with Queen-9 off, and then Bobby Baldwin also comes along with his pocket 4s, and now we head to the flop. So on the flop, with 17 million Korean won in the pot, we get a Jack 7-4, Jack of hearts, 7 of clubs, 4 of spades, and paying close attention, watch Aaron Zhang. He looks down. He does the look at his chips before betting. So he also looks back down when he is betting. This is very quick, very subconscious, a tell that means he has a hand that he's interested in betting, that he's interested in playing. It's not just an auto C-bet with air. He's likely to have some equity when he bets out 3 ways here, especially with Tom Dwan behind. And with that being said, because of the look down, I would like to see Bobby Baldwin raise the flop, especially if you know that you're going to be battling against the upper portion of the pre-flop raiser's range. You have a set, you want to get some money in, you have position. Now, on the flip side, if he didn't look down, if he just snap bets and you feel like that's going to be the weaker portion of the pre-flop raiser's range, in that case, maybe you just flat the flop, hope to induce some bets as the hand goes along, get some favorable cards like an ace that villain's going to pound and extract maximum value. But because of the look down, because of the physical tell, I would just go ahead and raise it up for value here in position. But as played, Bobby Baldwin opts to call, and now we head to the turn. All right, so the 10 of clubs pops off on the turn, and Aaron Zhang opts to bet about 40% pot, 14 million, and I like the size of the bet. He's going to get value from the pairs plus straight draws that are in Bobby Baldwin's range. He's going to get, value from the flush draws, from just a wide variety of hands that he's beating. If he sizes up here to like 70% or 66%, he runs the risk of Bobby Baldwin folding out the worst hands in his range and then calling with the hands that currently beat Aaron Zhang's top pair. So as far as sizing goes, I like it. The other option would be to check. And if you check, the most likely scenario is that it's going to go check, because Bobby Baldwin's going to check back those like pair plus straight draw type of hands on the turn. He's going to bet his floats where he picks up some equity. And he's also going to bet his value hands. So if you want to try to go for one more bet, then checking is going to be your best option. But I really prefer betting. I think he does a good job here. And now Bobby Baldwin, as he's going to cut his raise, he does a little like a lip tightening maneuver. And this could mean something. It could not mean something. I've witnessed him doing it in previous hands. So I'm not going to read too much into that. But then afterwards, he gets on his phone, right? He starts messing around with his phone after he raises. This to me is clever on Mr. Baldwin's part, because even though he's a crusher in life, he's obviously playing these massive stakes. Hugely successful businessman, former WSOP champion. These stakes, I would hope to God, matter to him because they're so big, right? So he's trying to act calm, cool, collected. And like I mentioned before, weak, strong, weak. So he's acting strong. He's exuding confidence, which is the recipe for a reverse tell, likely trying to get Aaron Zhang, trying to induce him to go for a three bet here on the turn. Unfortunately, Aaron Zhang opts to just flat to try to realize his equity. Preferably, we can go bigger here on the turn, right? He bet 14, we raised to 30. We're giving him 5.5 direct odds to call the turn. So if he picked up equity, then he's just going to flat and try to realize his equity and play the rivers very, very well. So I would much rather go for 3x, something along the line of like 43 million, 46 million, something like that, to try to maximize equity and charge those draws. But as played, Aaron Zhang does opt to flat, getting 5.5 to 1 with his top pair and straight flush draw. And now we're going to head to the river. So the river pops off the blessed deuce of clubs if you're Aaron Zhang, and the horrible, devastating deuce of clubs if you're Bobby Baldwin. Aaron Zhang rightly checks, and now the action's on Mr. Baldwin. He goes for 2/3 size value bet, 60 million. I think this is fine. He's going to get called by the top two pairs, by the over pairs, by the ace jacks. All of those hands, he's likely going to get paid. You can't check back here. You have to bet for value. The only question's what size. 2/3 seems pretty reasonable to me. Then the action gets back on Aaron Zhang, and then for the briefest of seconds, he looks back down again at his chips. This is him saying mentally in his head, he's shoving, right? This is his only option. He knows he's shoving. The delay is strictly just to delay, right? Just to not act too quickly. But that in conjunction with also he makes, for again, very, very briefly, that face, right? The frustration that he showed in that earlier clip. Except in this context, now he's going to shove after making that. And in the other one, he made it and he folded. So the other one is genuine frustration and annoyance. This one is feigned frustration, right? It's like, man, everything went bad for me and I'm just going to put all my money in and I'm super weak, so please don't call, sir. This always means strength. And Bobby Baldwin very astutely, using his powers of observation, picked up on Aaron Zhang's physical tells, or maybe he just knows that Aaron Zhang's not bluffing here with a high frequency. But either way, even if you think somebody's not bluffing here with a high frequency, when you have the physical tells, that also go in with that. It just makes the decision so much easier. So great fold, Mr. Bobby Baldwin. Well, this concludes Poker Tells episode 2. I want to thank you very much for checking out the Enhance Your Edge content on YouTube. If you loved our YouTube content, you can also check us out at enhanceyouredge.com and check out the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. It's a good show. You'll learn a lot. I'm very proud of this. If you love podcasts, give it a shot and see what you think. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm Coach Brad Wilson. Thank you so much for watching this video today.